Hey, it's Trip here. Last video we talked about making mark points and sending mark points. This video I want to expand on the sending of mark points a little bit and also some of the do's and don'ts about the mark point system, how to avoid becoming frustrated when you use it. So if I want to send a mark point to a specific aircraft, say my number 2, my wingman, we're down in the mud rooting around looking for targets while 3 and 4 are covering the air-to-air overhead, and over UHF and VHF we can hear that they're pretty busy with sorting bandits and all. And so what I want to avoid when I send a mark point is sending it to all the ships in my flight, 3 and 4 particularly, because the last thing they want to see in their HUD is a mark point 71 pop up here and voice message saying data in their headsets. They don't need to be distracted with that. So I want to send the mark point that I've made, the target that I've found, only to my number 2 wingman. So to do that, I hit list on the upfront control and then enter. And you notice on the transmit line of the data link page, there's a 10 between the asterisks. That means that if I were to transmit that mark point at this time, it would go to all 4, all the other 3 ships in my flight, 1, 2, 1, 3, and 1, 4. And I don't want to do that. I only want it to go to my number 2. So I would type 1 and then a 2 on the ICP and then enter. And now when I hit transmit, it only goes to my wingman. The own here means own ship. I'm the lead. I'm Ghost 11, so my address is 11. The family address, again, for everybody in the flight is 10. Now, if I had another flight in the same package, in this package, and I wanted to send the information to them, I would type in, say, 20, and then hit enter. And now when I transmit, it goes to all the aircraft in that flight. Or similarly, I can address it to just one specific flight member in that flight. All right, that's it for the IDM and sending the mark points to specific people. Now I want to talk about some of the do's and don'ts using the mark point system so that you don't become frustrated with it. It's really quite easy to do if you just follow the rules that we talked about in the first video. Quite simple. As a matter of fact, I found room on my HOTUS to make a button for mark, and I made one for M-Select. I also have one for return, but if you can find room, it'd be nice if you could incorporate these into your HOTUS. For me to make a mark point and to select it as my active steer point and to go down to the HSD as the center of interest and comm switch right takes me about 4 seconds. So in the heat of battle, that's really not a lot of time. I think you can spare 4 seconds to, make a mark point that's might be valuable. In a couple ways it's valuable. Not only are you sending it to your wingman so that if he hasn't found any targets, you can direct him onto a target, but it makes for good intel on these force-on-force campaigns that we fly over at Falcon Online. When you come back from a mission and you land and you park, and just before you shut the engine down, if you go into the steer point page and you pull up the lat and long for a target that you found, you can either use that target yourself to go right back up there to it, or you can pass it on as intel to another flight who's going up in an hour or 2 or the next day. The target might still be there, so it's a good piece of intel. So it's good to know how to make mark points. All right, so one of the things that you could, one of the traps that you can make to get yourself frustrated with a mark point system is this. I'm going to put us in air-to-ground mode, and notice that I've selected a steer point that's behind us. I can tell by the tadpole it's pointing behind us. It's a good way, it's about 100 miles or so. And I want to set up this scenario because a lot of times when you have a target steer point set, you made a pre-planned steer point, you're buzzing around the target looking for things on the ground to shoot, you'll overfly the target. Now all of a sudden the target, the steer point is behind you, as indicated in this scenario. And so on the air-to-ground radar, you notice that you can't slew the radar, no matter what distance you seem to be on. The cursor doesn't move, so you need to gain control of it. Let's say we have some juicy targets out front. We really want to, get those marked and use them. So what we have to do in this situation is we have to go to snowplow mode. And when we go to snowplow mode, we still don't have radar control until we TMS forward. And now that puts a timeline down in the lower right corner of the FCR. Now I have full control of the cursor to slew around and look for targets. And I'm not finding any on the 40-mile range because we're still 25 miles from Kotar and fairly low, so we can't see over the hill to pick out the targets at the range. So that's why we're not seeing anything on the FCR. But this is how you get the radar, get control of the radar cursor. Well, I'm going to get out of snowplow here for a second, and I'm going to go back to this situation where we have the steer point behind us. We don't have any radar control. I have left and right here, but I can't get the FCR cursor to move forward. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to go to the mark mode. We just keep hitting mark until we get to FCR. We don't want to go into the mark mode first, because now when we hit snowplow, I still don't have radar control of the cursors. But watch what happens when I try to TMS forward to ground stabilize the cursor and to get that timeline. It doesn't work. And what happens is it continues to make mark points each time I TMS forward. I still don't have radar or control of the radar cursors. So this is the problem. Don't get ahead of the game. If you're using the FCR or the TGP to mark a point, lock it first. And you want to lock it when you're not in the mark mode on the DED. So don't try to get ahead of the game here. Mark the point, and it's not going to let me, mark up or lock up a point here because the range is too far. But you would lock the point and then hit mark ICP, and now you're off and running. There we go. That's the mode that it would default to, the mark FCR. So avoid that conflict there and you won't have any problems. All right, another related, kind of similarly related problem with the snowplow mode is if I'm in snowplow and I've ground stabilized the radar cursors and I'm rooting around for a target, and the number 2 guy says, hey, send me that coordinate, the lat long for that radar site that you had locked up. So you say, oh, sure, no problem. So you go to the steer point mode, and it displays lat and longs for the steer points. But look what's happening. As I change the steer point, let's say it was steer point 27, which was the radar site, it's not giving me the proper lat and long. I don't even know what these coordinates are. But I can't dauber up to 27 and read in the coordinates because they're not displaying. And the reason they're not displaying is because you're in the snowplow mode with the radar cursor stabilized. Okay? So to get out of that situation, just hit snowplow again. And now watch what happens with the coordinates. Well, you know what? There we go. Okay, I was going to say they're not changing, but they will. They're not changing between 26, 27, 28 because I made multiple mark points. But when we get down here to 25, so now you can see new mark points. Okay, there we go. So that was the problem. I was in snowplow with the radar cursor stabilized on the FCR. So when that happens to you, just hit the snowplow button one more time and get out of that mode. Now you'll be able to read your coordinates to your wingy. And by the way, now that we have steer point 25 up here, steer point 25 is the bullseye location. So if I range out on the HSD, there we go. You can see that the ghost cursor is over the bullseye. And then when I go up to, say, steer point 26, it marked it. Let me expand out here. It went from the bullseye, and it's marked over this steer point that I made. I don't even know what these are. I just made a series of them. Okay, so to get the, remember I said that when you put mark points on the HSD, they weren't numbered in any way. They just show up as little blue X's. And so you don't know what they are until you have the white ghost cursor over the target. So now you know that, hey, that bridge that I marked up, mark point 28, well, that's it right there. Of the little blue crosses on the HSD that you made, this is the bridge. So now you can turn to it. This is one way to just visually see where it is in relation to you, and you can turn right toward it. Now, you don't get that. Here's another point to make. You only get this ghost cursor showing you where these mark points are, or steer points, if you're in the air to ground mode. Watch what happens when I get out of air to ground. So I'm back in the nav mode, and now I cycle the cursor from 25. Let me range out here. See the bullseye? There's no ghost cursor over the bullseye. There's no ghost cursor over this X that I made here, right up here. So you have to be in the air to ground mode to distinguish these little blue X's that come up on the HSD. Now, remember I said the HSD shows you the mark points that you make from 26 to 30, and then it puts a little X for each one. But the problem is that when you overwrite a mark point, in other words, you go from 26 to 30 and then back to 26, it'll erase the blue X that was associated with the first number 26 mark point that you made. So there's only five of them on the HSD at one time. Now, when your wingmen send you mark points, okay, it shows up. Let's say the first mark point you receive from any one of your wingmen is mark point 71. It'll show up as another X. Now, I think the ones you make are large X's, and the ones that you receive are small X's. I don't get caught up trying to remember which is which, but just be aware that there'll be some small X's and some big X's, and you can have a lot of those other X's that wingmen send you. I think you can go from like 71 up to 80, as I recall. So you can have more than just 5. But as I was saying, in the course of a mission, if you have more than 2 X's, if you've received more than 2 targets, you're pretty busy. You probably have dropped all your weapons, and you don't have any more weapons to put on target anyway. So your HSD is just not going to be cluttered up with a bunch of X's. You shouldn't really be sending your wingman multiple mark points. All right, let's get out of that mode, and I think that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. Some of the do's and don'ts, making the mark and M-select buttons on your HOTAS. It's very convenient. And I think I will end it here, and hope you got something out of this video.